Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So this is the one I promised on Gaza. So it begins with the documentary. I think it's Gaza War on Medics, I think it was called. And originally I think it was commissioned by the BBC, but they didn't want to show it. So then Channel 4 took it and they broadcast it. And I mean, it's worth a watch. I've clipped 2 bits that are going to be on the examples. The main problem I found with it, which is maybe why the BBC were reluctant to show it, especially with all the claims of anti-Semitism and all the things that seem to be attacked at the BBC of recent years. The problem I had with it, which may be theirs, is the people they were talking to, the medics, who had been, well, it seemed like one of them had been kidnapped, possibly even abused, detained, crossed one country to another, although I guess Israel might not see Palestine as a country, which of course is against international law, no matter how long it's done. Just another example of the fragrance of international law, but if that's what happened. But the issue is that they would give their testimony of what happened, and then we would find out that they, on social media, praised the October the 7th terrorist attack on Israel and support Hamas. Now, I get the issue with Palestinians maybe supporting I believe they elected in Hamas. I don't know if there was any other party to pick, but I understand why they may support Hamas because the history reasons that, and I'm not condoning supporting terrorism, but I don't know if they have much choice in it, and also in the fact that they probably see that these are the only ones fighting for their rights. Not that I condone the way in which it's being fought, because I don't condone either side. Whether it's the Israeli and how they're operating Gaza, whether it's Hamas and their activities and not wanting to negotiate, not really caring about the plight of their own citizens. That includes also the UK, the US, Europe. In fact, every country and world leader who is turning a blind eye to this. So what I see it is this is a travesty of humanity, is look at from each angle of what human beings are doing, and yet they stand up and defend their actions as if there is some justification in what we're doing to each other as human beings, over land, over power, over control, over greed. Those things that always come up that we learnt from our forefathers, and yet we're still shackling ourselves to those things, as I mentioned in previous Pursuits of Truth. But yeah, my problem with it is their testimony is tainted when they can, and this is the thing, and the hypocrisy and double standards that we talked about previously that we get with world leaders is the same with these citizens who can, when it happens to, and I know this is a human failing, when it happens to them, when they see that their innocent loved ones are targeted, whether it's as they might claim on purpose, or whether it's, I suspect, not targeted, but maybe there's not so much concern over if it does happen. They see that oh no, this is my child who got killed, or this is my brother, my aunt, look at my people, what's happening to them. But then they don't see the same when they praise a terrorist organisation who on October the 7th kidnapped, which is against international law and any humane way of seeing things, kidnapped non-combatants, families that they had to hide in shelters, that they were murdered with guns and bombs, people at a music concert. And then there's allegations of rape and abuse and other things against international law and war crimes. So the problem is when you are saying, like, I support that kind of action, that's another human being's life. But then when it happens to you, it's like, well, this is wrong. What's going on? It's wrong both sides. How can you not? And this is what I didn't get, because I didn't, and I don't know whether they asked them, but there was never a sense of like, yes, I wrongly supported a terrorist organisation. I wrongly supported the action of October the 7th. And now, having seen it happen to me, I realise that killing, no matter whose uniform, no matter which human being is doing it to which, is wrong. And especially when it's against non-combatants, because we all understand, because we've justified, although I don't see it as, but we have, as human beings, justified war when it is soldiers fighting soldiers. And the rules are that you don't, although this has been broken by even the West and most countries in war, is you don't target non-combatants, you don't target civilians, you don't target women and children who are not fighting. If they're soldiers, then that's part of the deal, isn't it? And that's the justification. But in the system that we live, not that I agree with that, but that's the system that we live. So either side should be going against, when either side, whether it's yours or the others, that when innocent lives are killed, whether they're Israeli, whether they're Palestinian, whether they're Gazan, whatever, when innocent non-combatants are killed, we should be saying that is wrong and that shouldn't be happening, not supporting that. So that's the problem that I had with this, that the two of the cases that you hear, yes, and I get that it's possible that their testimony may be true, but the problem is we know in war, the first casualty, as the maxim goes, is truth. And if you're supporting a terrorist organisation on social media and thinking that that kidnapping and raping and whatever happened, murder of non-combatant civilians is supportable, then can we trust that you're telling this is what's happening? Now, it is possible that that could be true, because there are instances through war where that people may be part of an organisation that may be a terrorist or freedom fighter, depending on, which side you look at it. And I guess in war, sometimes, like all armies do, they kill other people. And I don't know where I was going with that now. I've lost the thread of what I was going to say, but yeah, it just, to me, that was a problem. Oh yeah, I was saying that it's possible that you could be part of an organisation that is, to say, a freedom fighter, and you do, you do bad things. Like I think if my history is right, in South Africa, when the ANC were fighting, they used means of bombs and etc. I don't know if they were like say even the IRA, whether they gave warnings, whether civilians sometimes were killed, whether and that kind of thing. And yet their argument or the reason for doing it may be justifiable, or they may have testimony of like in South Africa when they were put in tyres and burnt, that just because they supported the ANC in, say like Margaret Thatcher considered them terrorists, that doesn't necessarily mean their testimony wasn't true. So what I'm saying is their testimony may well be true, that what they're talking about, these black sites, because there were photo, and I'll try and put this as the main thing, of these 4 people at the front, and in the background was this big like clay hole filled full of people. And it instantly reminded me of that documentary I saw on, I think it was on Netflix, that I put on, The Pursuit of Truth. It was about the Second World War, and about how Nazis rounded up Jews and put them in these the big holes, and then made them stand, and then shot them, and they fell into the hole. But just seeing these pictures, it just gave me that image. Now, I'm not trying to equate anything, but it just felt vaguely familiar, and like we haven't really learned the lessons that we're meant to have learned. The whole reason for the United Nations, the whole reason for international law and this kind of thing, and working together was to stop world wars. They failed after the first one, but the problem is now there's no world wars, but there's lots of little proxy wars. But it's just it was really interesting documentary, and it shows that there's lots of things that are going on, which I guess in the future, when dust is settled and premiers have left, that people will look at this and are probably going to look at a lot of things that were done by human beings against human beings that fall into that category of war crime, if what's being told is true. But there's lots of other examples that I've given. There's one from UNICEF talking about, in another clip, about the aid problem, and there's another one, I don't know if it was Yada Hakim, well, there was two from Yada Hakim. One is about an interview that she does, I think it was the IDF, and that was quite interesting, where it had, where it showed like the media sort of very coming down on, using the Hamas figures and not really, using those figures as if we can trust them, and we don't know whether we can really trust them, and then talking about the messiness of war and collateral damage. And whilst I believe that the problem is, like I always say, they use the word targeted, I don't really think that Israel or IDF are targeting. I don't think that's their mindset, but I do worry that they may be not caring too much if, like, there's an example that you hear where there was the Hope charity that's part of the UNICEF one, where they go and there's two people with backpacks who I assume they consider to be Hamas terrorists. They're walking past loads of women and children who are getting milk formula, I believe it is, and they fired a drone rocket at those two individuals. I assume it killed them, and the shrapnel from that, because they were so close, has killed, I think was it 10 children. And UNICEF went to see this, so it's like, at least they can't say that, well, this is Hamas figures, we can't trust this. This is UNICEF. I don't know. I assume they're part of the UN because they've got UNICEF, but so I guess Israel can easily say, well, we know Israel. Some some people were involved in the October the 7th that may have also worked for the UN, which of course could be a cover. That doesn't necessarily mean the UN is tainted by those few people. But I get why that could be a problem now, that, can we trust UNICEF in their, well, I assume we can, but it's just, that's the easy get out, isn't it? But the problem is that if you're saying that you're not targeting, and I don't think they targeted those women and children, they were targeting the two individuals. I hope they had intelligence to prove that they were Hamas terrorists. But the problem is they were in close proximity to all these women and children, and that they couldn't have waited for them to be further away. I mean, maybe they're going to say that they felt they were far enough away, but I think if they killed that many, that's probably not accurate and not a good enough reason. You'd have to be quite a distance, because we know shrapnel goes pretty far, especially with these missiles. So that does, there's lots of evidence. And yes, why I get, I felt that Yada Hakim, when she was interviewing the IDF person, that it was too much, but I mean, they're seeing a lot of stuff, and they may be seeing uncensored stuff because they're not showing us. But the problem is by using Hamas figures and using the word like targeting, like I say in previous ones, I hope I haven't shared this before, but I said in the last one that they need to be talking more specifically about not targeting, because I don't think they really believe that it's targeting. I think that's just hyperbole and for their story and their angle. But they should be talking about, are they really, I mean, maybe they can't do it for legal reasons, I don't know, that it's not targeting, but are they taking due care and attention not to kill civilians? Like, if it does happen, they should be making sure, with the food aid programs as well, that's I think in one of them, I think that was all the bits that I had. If I have something else, then I'll add in a bit more of me talking about it. But I think that was everything that I had. Oh yeah, there was one more. There was Iran as well. I guess this is all connected. And the Iranians, the Harmony had come out and talked, and they were interviewing, doing vox pops with people outside, making out that they don't care about America and they're not worried, and their ministers saying that Israel better be careful and they're hitting them harder. And then like all these people chanting for some historical event in Shia, was it Sunni? I think it was Shia history, and just like, I mean, I don't know. What we saw on TV, assuming we were shown, how it was, it didn't look that devastating. What Iran were doing, it didn't look like that. Well, they didn't look as scary as when we were shown what Israel and what America could do. So whether they were being restrained, which I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I know all countries are going to talk up, like they're the best and they're, we've got all great military. I mean, maybe they do, I don't know, but it just seemed a bit like untruthful. And also what worried me is like, we're never going to, like I always talk about the pursuit of truth of us humans all coming together. But when you see how fractured we are, how people can be like chanting for things 1400 years ago and crying about it and getting so invested in their own little boxes and stories, how are we ever going to like get rid of all that and work together and realize, that we should be, I mean, maybe we don't need to get rid of all those things, but just how it just seems like everyone's so invested in their own box and belief that they've forgotten the initial intrinsic truth that wasn't made up by man or doesn't have some other, hasn't been cultivated by man or taken over or co-opted, whether that's religion or government, etc. and money and all that stuff. But the only intrinsic truth that is that it isn't a man-made construct unless we create it ourselves is the fact that we're all human beings, we're all humanity. That's the truth. That's the undeniable truth. That should be what this is called, actually. And that we're all human beings first and foremost. And the other things are, if you believe in God, then it's God, or if you believe in the aspects that are created by man, whether it's money and structure and government and hospitals and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think it's impossible for us ever to see ourselves as all one, even though that's actually truly what we are. Whether we're divided into little boxes, whether that's countries and governments and, our patriotism to all that kind of stuff. We're so engrossed in all that now that I don't see how we're ever going to, because it's always going to be a hindrance to us all working together, no? Because we're always going to see ourselves as that little box, and our box is better than the other box, or we need to defeat that box, or we need to take that box over. So I don't know how is it possible for 7 billion people to realise that we're all human beings and that we have been given everything and all the chances and we can do whatever we want, and we're choosing to keep ourselves in these boxes created by people thousands of years ago that couldn't even use Google, that you just wanted, that hated each other and wanted to occupy and possess, like with colonialism and etc., land and, enslave in the slavery sense, and also in the sense of us all just working to manufacture, to make money of things that products competing against each other, most of which are not needed. I don't know whether that's possible. And then the other thing with the Iran thing was hearing that, if anyone can actually translate this, I did look it up as much as I could because I didn't want to type it in, but I looked up like how in Arabic is Israel, and it did seem to match that. So it did, like they were saying something about Israel. When it came to death, I couldn't hear that same thing. So I'm assuming, if I can trust Sky News, that this is exactly, they were actually playing a clip of what happens in Iran. I don't know if there's any Iranians that listen to this that can tell me whether, or any people who speak Arabic can listen to that bit and confirm that in Iran they do actually pump out over big speakers, "Death to Israelis." I mean, it just seems like, and then you've got a woman saying about, "Oh, I love peace." Wait a minute, you love peace, but can you hear what your government is pumping out? "Death to Israelis." Even I know, what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and with the international law from 1967 and settlements and all that kind of stuff, and no two-state and no recognizing of Palestine as a country, and the whole history of all of that. But you can't say you want peace, but you're listening to someone say death to somebody else, because you're forgetting, and this is why you're forgetting the humanity. You're forgetting that there's women and children, brothers and sisters, uncles, mothers and fathers, just like you. I don't know. But yeah, these are the clips. More examples of the travesty of humanity against humanity. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.
Dr. Al-Bursh made a final call to his family.
كويس؟ مبسوط؟
Yes, happy? Yes.
يا بيي وين
Where is
الين؟
Ellen? Here's Ellen. Come talk to Dad. Come on, before the Jews, Israelis come. Dad,
الين وين انت يا بابا؟
Ellen, where are you? I've missed
مشتاق
you.
لك.
Dad, come stay with
حاضر
us.
بكره بجيكم.
Yes, I will come.
بتديري بالك على
Take
ماما.
care of your mum.
أنا صراحة ساعتها حسيت قلبي طلع ومتكني الخوف تركني إنه بده ينزل الجيش أبصر إيش يعمل فيه يضربه يحبسه يأسره. أنا مش متعودة على فرق الدكتور يعني.
There is no footage of Adnan al-Bursh being seized, but Al Jazeera obtained these pictures showing men stripped to their underwear in the vicinity of the hospital. We don't know if there are any medics in these pictures.
فخرجنا جميعا للتحقيق خارج مستشفى العود، ولكن بعد حوالي 5 دقائق جاء أحد الجنود وقام بالنداء على الدكتور عدنان البوش باسمه. أثناء الدكتور عدنان البوش لم يظهر عليه الخوف صراحة، وكان وقف وذهب معهم، ولكنه نظر إلي نظرة مباشرة، وكانت هذه النظرة بمثابة وداع، وكانت هذه آخر لحظة نرى فيها الدكتور عدنان البوش.
Like hospitals, medics are given extensive protections under international law, regardless of their political views. The Israeli army said Dr. al-Bursh was arrested on suspicion of terrorism. They provided no evidence of this. Dr. al-Bursh praised the October 7th attacks at the time and has been supportive of militant groups in the past, like some other doctors in this film.
That's the problem, no?
Following 3 of the hospital raids that we've investigated, we found that medics were taken to locations human rights groups have described to us as black sites, where there's no judicial oversight. Footage of the sites is rare, but this was filmed by a member of the IDF in a football stadium in Gaza City and was posted online in December 2023. We can't confirm if medics are in these images, but thousands of Palestinians have been taken to these sites, including medics. We traveled to Ramallah in the occupied West Bank to meet Badur Hassan, an Amnesty International researcher. Now, you've been investigating black sites in Gaza. What are these black sites being used for?
In these sites, the soldiers has absolutely complete power to abuse, to torture, to hit, to humiliate the detainee without any oversight.
What can you tell me about the detainment of Palestinian doctors and healthcare workers?
So if there is one characteristic for which this war has stood out is the systematic targeting of the Palestinian healthcare sector in the Gaza Strip. We're not talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 healthcare workers. We're talking about hundreds of detainees. Israeli authorities would say that maybe these healthcare workers know some information about hostages, or they knew information about Hamas fighters being treated. But on many occasions, these doctors are probably interrogated just once or twice, and that's it. The torture and unlawful treatment to which healthcare workers are subjected is evident intent of the Israeli authorities to destroy Palestinians. So there is also an element of genocidal intent, and destroying the healthcare sector, basically taking it out of service through different means, not always necessarily by directly attacking them, but by also detaining hundreds of healthcare workers.
Boudour says she's identified at least 4 black sites so far. So do you think there are other black sites that you haven't heard about, that you haven't been able to identify?
I think what we were able to identify is just a drop in an ocean of horror.
But it's Amnesty International, so you'd expect you can trust them, no?
This image of a black site was posted online. We've been told the 4 men in the foreground are all healthcare workers. One of them is now in Egypt. You are one of these men. Which one are you?
This is who I am.
You're that one.
Yes.
Okay. Khalid Hamouda is a specialist surgeon.
It was shocking.
I mean, this is really shocking. It looks
Yes.
apocalyptic. And later you said that you were put into this pit.
It looks like
It's a huge hole, you know, very high.
in the Second World War.
A month before this picture was taken, Dr. Hamouda was working at the Indonesian hospital. After it was attacked and shut down by the Israeli army, he was forced to move to Kamal Adwan Hospital, a short walk from his home. This is your home?
This is where I live.
Okay.
Our building. It's of 3 floors.
Yeah. He shared the building with his extended family, 3 of whom were doctors. He says they were the only occupants of the building. On December 3rd, 2023, his house was hit by a direct airstrike. 10 of Khalid Hamouda's family were killed.
فاستشهد أغلب أهلي بما فيهم والدي
Killed include my father,
وأخي الكبير
also my older brother,
عمره
13 years
38
old,
سنة
with
مع
3
أولاده
children.
ال3 وأخي الأصغر دكتور محمد وعمي وزوجة عمي. أنا أصبت إصابة داخل البيت أنا وابن أحمد، لكن زوجتي وبناتي الثنتين ما أصيبوا، فتم في إخلاءهم للخارج.
So can you tell us what happened after they attacked it, where you went?
We move away about 30 meters here, exactly, in front of this building.
So all these buildings were still standing and only your building was hit?
Yes.
So you ran up the street?
Yes.
Up to another building?
We thought we were safe now because the airstrike finished and the building almost destroyed.
Yes. And about 10 of you sat outside this building in the road?
Yes.
And that's when a drone strike hit?
Yes. أنا وأسرتي أنا وزوجتي وبنتي وبناتي وابني في نفس اللحظة تم استهدافنا، فبلا شك أنا أرى أنه كان متعمد يعني.
Khalid Hamouda was injured. He was taken to Kamal Adwan Hospital.
فوجئت بإحدى الممرضات اللي كانت تعمل معي حامل طفلتي. كانت حاملة بنت ريم وكانت استشهدت. هي باللحظة اللي أنا عرفت أنها استشهدت اصبر يعني عرفتها من ملابسها يعني، فطلبت منها طبعا نقرب عشان اشوف وجهها فعرفتها يعني، فقلت تعرفها قلت لها هذا بنتي يعني. فقلت لها
my
بنتي،
daughter.
فقالت لي وصلتنا ما
She
فيها
said
روح
she
يعني.
was dead on arrival.
تم إخلاء زوجتي من
My
الشارع،
wife's body was
وفوجئت
retrieved
أنا
from
يوم
the
الصبح
street,
الساعة يمكن 7
and I was
صباحا
told the
إنه
following
زوجتي
morning that
برضو
I'd lost my wife too.
استشهدت.
The two strikes killed 12 members of Khalid Hamouda's family, a family of doctors.
وبرضه ما
I don't
بعرف
know where
وين
they were
دفنوا، ما
buried. I
شفتهم
never
بعد
saw them
القصة هذه
again.
يعني.
We asked the IDF why they targeted Khalid Hamouda's family home. They did not respond to this question. Khalid Hamouda and his surviving family joined thousands of others taking refuge in the grounds of his workplace, Kamal Adwan Hospital. For a week, the hospital was bombarded before being raided and then forcibly evacuated. The UN says Israeli soldiers detained over 70 medics. Khalid was amongst them and was separated from his 2 surviving children. The Israeli army said they'd detained 90 terrorists during the raids, including the hospital director, whom they claimed was a Hamas operative, and again said that the hospital was being used as a command and control center.
This is Kamal Adwan Hospital. They took us, we walk all the street,
Yeah.
and they asked the doctors to sit down there. يعني في بعض الأمر ظنينا فعلا إنه هم يروحون على مكان ثاني تيجي تعزلهم إن بعيدا عن المدنيين، لكن سرعان خلال ساعة تم دمجنا بالمدنيين مرة ثانية.
It's here where Khalid was photographed.
I'll put this as the cover, I think.
وفي جندي أو ضابط واقف ورا الكاميرا بيقوم بفرز الناس، ناس تروح الناحية اليمين، ناس تروح الناحية الشمال، يعني يمين ويسار. أنا كنت من المحظوظين طبعا اللي طلب مني أروح ناحية اليسار. طبعا محظوظين بتهكما يعني، لأنه أنا لما رحت ناحية اليسار عرفت إنه تم يعني اللي بروح ناحية اليسار في الغالب يتم اعتقالهم.
Khalid says he was taken to an adjacent building and interrogated.
فوجئت لما أنا بلغت إنه طبيب وجراح في الإندونيسيا إنه بدأ أكثر اهتماما، هز براسه ونادى على واحد قال له تعال خذه. في يعني وبدأ يخبط فيه يضرب فيه.
After 8 hours, where he says he and others were violently beaten, Dr. Hamouda was then transported to Israel. The forcible transfer of prisoners across borders is prohibited under international law. The IDF told us that those found not to be involved in terrorist activity are released as soon as possible.
That doesn't count to breaking international law.
طبعا تم تقييدي من الخلف وتم تغطية يعني عيني وتم اغتيادي للشاحنة ورمي في الشاحنة بشكل عنيف، فكان وضع غير إنساني غير لائق.
Barely a week after his daughter and wife were killed, Dr. Hamouda was in Israeli detention. He says he was held in stress positions and on one occasion forced to grip barbed wire. Dr. Hamouda has expressed support for Hamas on social media, including the attacks on October 7th, and mourning a relative who was a senior Hamas commander. After 3 weeks, he was released without charge. The IDF told us they rejected the claims made on the use of black sites to avoid judicial oversight, as well as claims regarding enforced disappearances, and that they follow international and Israeli law. We spoke to Israeli medics who confirmed that some doctors had mistreated Palestinian detainees, but they were all too scared to go on camera for fear of retribution. Finally, one doctor who'd been stationed at Sidi Taiman's field hospital, among others, agreed to meet on condition of anonymity.
I remember at least one case where a very painful procedure was being done and the patient got no consent. Things were not explained to him in his language, so he didn't know what was going on. And to the best of my knowledge, no painkillers were administered to him around that procedure, and I was there. I saw that happening, and I saw him screaming. And I saw no one stopping it.
Why do you think this was happening? Why weren't they using anesthetic on this patient?
Well, I think that was retribution. Like that was a way to inflict pain. So the scary part is how I could not recognize that. When I saw that, and I recognize how I have normalized the fact that even those patients are defined and are called just by a 5-digit number. They don't have a name, they don't move. They're blindfolded, so you do not look at them in the eyes. So you're taking a lot of the humanity and the empathy that you might feel away. So there is no doubt that, in many ways, I am an accomplice as well as an Israeli physician to how we have been treating Gazans.
Were you given any guidelines, or were you briefed about the parameters within which you could work?
The only guidelines that we see is about, like, keeping ourselves anonymous. Just because they wouldn't want their names coming out to, let's say, foreign countries and foreign journalists just because they might be liable, potentially, of war crimes.
What happens if you speak out?
Well, I might be viewed as a traitor.
So in this atmosphere where people are scared to speak out, do you think this is causing a cover-up?
I don't even think that in the Israeli society there is a need for cover-up these days. You can do almost whatever you want when it comes to Gazans. Honestly, I think that's how the Israeli society has been dehumanizing Palestinians for years. It didn't start on October 7th. It's nothing new.
The IDF and the Israel Prison Service did not respond to the allegation that Israeli doctors mistreated detainees. But the IDF said detainees can request medical care. Dr. Khaled Hamouda had also been detained at Sdei Taiman. His detention had coincided with another doctor, the surgeon from Al-Shifa Hospital, Adnan Al-Bursh.
طبعا ميزته بسرعة لأنه كان مع مجموعة من الأطباء.
What was Adnan's state of mind like? Did he look healthy to you?
لا ما أقول هي طبعا كان واضح عليه آثار الضرب والتعذيب يعني لدرجة إن أنا كنت أوديه على الحمام وأجيبه من الحمام يعني دورة المياه يعني. أخبار إنه تم الاعتداء عليه في فترة نقله من المستشفى لغاية ما وصل للمعتقل، غالبا ظروف مشابهة لظروف اعتقالي يعني، وتم التعدي عليه عدة مرات. طبعا أنا أعتقد دكتور عدنان تعامل معاملة مختلفة عن بقية المرضى، حتى عن بقية الأطباء. وجوده طبعا كرئيس قسم جراحة العظام في مستشفى الشفاء.
In mid-April, Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh was transferred to Ofa prison. He died on the day of his arrival. What did you think when you heard Adnan had died in prison?
أنا ما بحبش كلمة died. He was murdered يعني قتل. He was killed. أعتقد هناك بطريقة أو بأخرى نتيجة التعذيب يعني.
Testimony from other prisoners provided to an Israeli human rights group describes prison guards beating Dr. Al-Bursh and throwing him to the ground before his death. The Israel Prison Service says it is not aware of any of the claims made in this film, and the IDF says they act in accordance with international law and the abuse of detainees is strictly prohibited. Israeli documents show that 65 Palestinians have died in its detention since October 2023. Along with Adnan Al-Bursh, there are at least 3 other healthcare workers. Dr. Iyad Al-Rantisi, head of obstetrics at Kamal Adwan Hospital. Dr. Ziad Al-Dalu from Al-Shifa Hospital. And paramedic Hamdan Abu Anaba. In October 2024, Israeli forces launched another ground invasion of northern Gaza. They issued evacuation orders to the remaining 400,000 Palestinians and cut all aid reaching them. Once again, Kamal Adwan, Al Auda, and the Indonesian hospitals came under attack, and the UN Secretary General warned the world it needed to act to prevent ethnic cleansing. But the plan to clear northern Gaza was delayed. The director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safir, was one of several doctors refusing to leave his patients. Here he is, standing next to Dr. Mohammed Obaid.
الوضع يعني نحن تحت مسمى إبادة حقيقية تجري بحق أبناء شعبنا في شمال القفقاز. الوضع الصحي الوضع منهار. الله أكبر.
In late October, following another raid, an Israeli drone strike killed his son, Ibrahim. The next day, he spoke to Al Jazeera.
Everything we built, they burnt. They've burned our hearts and killed our son.
After more than 2 months under attack and with the hospital in flames, it was forced to finally close. Israel says it detained over 200 militants in the area, but the hospital says Israel detained many healthcare workers, like Dr. Abu Safir.
Could they be one and the same?
This is the last time he was seen in Gaza by his colleagues, walking towards an Israeli tank. Dr. Abu Safir was taken to Sidi Taiman and is now being held in Ofa prison. Israel accuses him of having a rank in Hamas. In March 2025, an Israeli court classified him as an unlawful combatant and ordered his continued imprisonment without charge or trial. His lawyer says he's not a terrorist and that he's been held in solitary confinement, shown signs of torture, and denied proper medical care. Having worked through 4 separate hospital sieges, Dr. Mohammed Obaid was taken by Israeli soldiers on October 26, 2024. He is still being held. Over a year after his death, the body of Adnan al-Bursh has not been returned to his family in Gaza. After more than 6 months in detention, Dr. Khalid al-Sir, the surgeon who stayed on at Nasser Hospital through the worst, returned to his family. Like all of those doctors we've spoken to detained by Israel, he was released without charge. And like all of those doctors, Khalid al-Sir says he was tortured. Dr. al-Sir was released a year after the war began. A war in which over 1,500 healthcare workers have reportedly been killed, including at least 50 highly qualified specialists. A war in which Gaza's healthcare system has been destroyed. In May 2025, the IDF struck the European hospital, saying it killed Hamas military chief Mohammed Sinwar. In June, it issued an edited video it said showed a tunnel under the hospital where Sinwar and other militants died, and gave a media tour to some journalists. Also in May, Israeli government minister Bezalel Smotrich vowed to destroy Gaza.
What does victory in Gaza look like? Gaza will be totally destroyed, simply because its entire terrorist infrastructure above and below the ground. So simply completely destroyed.
אמרתי, אזרחיה מרוכזים מציר מורג ודרומה במרחב הומניטרי שאין בו חמאס ואין בו טרור, ואגב משם הם מתחילים לצאת במספרים גדולים מאוד למדינות שלישיות. זה אירוע שישנה את המציאות, את ההיסטוריה של מדינת ישראל עשרות שנים קדימה, אנחנו חייבים.
In response to the allegations filmed, the Israeli Defense Forces said we act in full accordance with the international law and outright reject the allegations of deliberate targeting medical facilities and medical personnel. The Israeli Prison Service said all prisoners are detained according to the law. All basic rights required are fully applied by the professional trained prison guards. Hamas said, we firmly reject the allegations of Israeli Occupation Army IOF that Hamas is using hospitals and medical facilities for military activities. Such claims must be examined critically and supported by credible evidence. Israel also denies multiple charges of genocide brought by South Africa, including destroying essential health services and preventing births, and is fighting them at the International Court of Justice.
Tonight, Gaza compared to the Wild West. An IDF whistleblower describes how the life or death of a civilian can be dependent on a commander's mood. After 3 tours in Gaza, the soldier reveals his unit was ordered to shoot anyone who entered no-go zones, even if they pose no threat.
In their mind, these people aren't innocent.
When people have been shot and killed, were they just left where they were?
Usually, yes.
He broke his silence as Prime Minister Netanyahu arrived in Washington to meet the US president, and as indirect talks between Israel and Hamas continue. So will Donald Trump declare peace this week? His administration has called on the United Nations to sack its human rights advisor after a report criticized some American companies. We'll speak to Francesca Albanese live this evening. Also on the program, should residents have been warned earlier? Questions for authorities in Texas after at least 91 people were killed in flash floods. And a verdict in the case that gripped Australia. Erin Patterson is found guilty of triple murder. She went looking for death cap mushrooms and served them to her family in beef Wellingtons. Coming up, the 3 lies that led to her conviction. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Donald Trump has made a habit of pledging peace, and in the past week, he's increased the pressure for a ceasefire deal in Gaza, declaring it could be possible within days. Israel has agreed to the terms of a truce, but Hamas still have concerns. That's why tonight, negotiators from both sides are still holding indirect talks in Qatar. The US president is hoping he can soon stand in the White House alongside the Israeli Prime Minister to announce at least a temporary pause in the fighting. These images, photographed by an Israeli reservist in Gaza, show a family home completely destroyed. He's decided to speak after wrestling with his conscience. He says civilians are being gunned down at random, even if they pose no threat. The IDF has denied those accusations. To date, the Gaza Health Ministry says almost 60,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023. Some reports suggest the number of people killed could be significantly higher. More than 136,000 people are believed to have been injured since the fighting started. We'll discuss the terms of any ceasefire in a moment, but let's get started with this report from Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi.
I think everything in war is kind of messes you up.
It is rare to hear Israeli soldiers speak openly about their time in Gaza. But after 3 tours of duty, this reservist says his conscience won't let him stay silent.
Every commander can choose for himself what he does, so it's kind of like Wild West. And so some commanders can really decide to do war crimes and do bad things and like don't have very consequences of that.
He agreed to talk on condition of anonymity, fearing he could be labelled a traitor or ostracised at home. These photos were taken while he was serving in Gaza, where he was stationed in the homes of displaced Palestinians.
I think you can't be in this scenario for so long and not like normalize it and not like kind of you lose your mind, and then killing is more and more normalized, and you can't see the problem in it.
He was first called up on October the 8th, the day after the Hamas terror attack. And it didn't take long before he had serious concerns about how the war was being fought.
There was a building near our territory that Gaza citizens tried for a few days. They came there trying to steal like metals and solar panels and stuff like that, so they could sell it and have some money. Like, for sure there were no terrorists over there. But because it was like in the territory that they are not supposed to be in, and it also varied between days, but some days they decided to shoot them.
During his deployments, he was stationed in what's known as the Netzarim Corridor, a key Israeli military zone created during the war that cuts across central Gaza, dividing the territory into north and south, giving the IDF greater control.
They don't really talk to you about civilians that may come to your place. Like, I was in the Netzarim road, and they say, if someone comes to here, it means that he knows he shouldn't be there, and if he still comes, it means he's a terrorist. But this is like what they tell you, but I don't really think it's true. They might be shot, they might be captured. Really depends on like the day, the mood of the commander.
So what would be the reaction from soldiers when they killed a civilian?
I think a lot of them really feel like they did something good. Because I think the core of it, that in their mind, these people aren't innocent.
When people have been shot and killed, were they just left where they were?
Usually, yes.
We put the allegations of arbitrary killings in the Netzarim corridor area to the Israeli military. They told us the IDF operates in strict accordance with its rules of engagement and international law, taking feasible precautions to mitigate civilian harm. The IDF operates against military targets and objectives and does not target civilians or civilian objects. It went on. In order to mitigate harm to the civilian population, the IDF issues evacuation warnings to the civilian population and requests it temporarily evacuate certain areas of intense fighting for its safety. The IDF continuously informs the civilian population of any changes. Reports and complaints regarding the violation of international law by the IDF are transferred to the relevant authorities responsible for examining exceptional incidents that occurred during the war. This is just one soldier's account. He says he's speaking out now out of moral duty.
Kind of feel like I took part of something bad, and so I think it's like I need to counter it with something good that I do. And I hope that by speaking of it, it can change like how things are being done. And I think a lot of people, if they knew exactly what's happening, they wouldn't. It wouldn't go down very good for them, and they won't agree with it.
Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, Jonathan Conricus is a former spokesperson for the IDF, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Thank you so much, Mr. Conricus, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to first get your reaction to our report there.
Yes, it's an interesting. Thank you and good evening for having me on. It's been a while since I was last on Sky UK. I think it's an interesting report, and I think it reflects, one part of how ugly, difficult, and horrible fighting in densely populated urban terrain is. And I think that what this young man, who I saw the last part of the episode of the interview, He looks like a more or less genuine man. I don't think he's motivated by anything sinister, but I think he's reflecting on how difficult it is to fight in such an area and what the challenges are on the battlefield. And beyond what the IDF's response, which you dutifully and professionally put in full length, and that's good, I'd say the following for people at home to be able to understand the complexity. When was the last time that anyone saw a Hamas operative, that we would refer to as terrorist, fighting in uniform? I don't recall Hamas fighting in uniform for the last year and a half. The only time that they've been in uniform is when they have been handing over hostages or in parades. And I think that's very important for people to understand that, unfortunately, there's no boundary, there's no distinction between civilian and military.
Are you comparing the actions of the IDF to what Hamas is doing and what Hamas has done? Because, if we talk about the IDF talks about being, one of the most moral armies on the planet, a responsible army. What we're seeing now, not just citing our report here, but Haaretz, one of the flagship newspapers in Israel, Israeli investigative reporters, talking about this being a widespread issue. It's not just about our report. We're now hearing more and more soldiers coming out and saying this. Are we seeing a breakdown in the chain of command of the IDF?
No, far from it. And I think you're citing two sources that are, the Haaretz report was widely condemned, and many times I've had credit for and respect of Haaretz, but I think this report was very, very politically motivated and founded again on anonymous sources that were not speaking up and were not providing any claims. And since the claims are interesting and they fall into the narrative that is very popular here on Sky and many other outlets, which seeks to put blame and responsibility on Israel, it is widely amplified. I think that it is far from true.
I mean, if I can just...
I'll just continue.
Because I just want to point out...
I would just like to continue and the answer, because at the bottom line, we are fighting in an environment which is tactically almost impossible to maintain clear lines and distinction.
What we're talking about here, Mr. Conricus, is not a combat zone. We're talking about people coming, civilians coming to seek aid.
No, we are talking about a combat zone. We are indeed talking about the combat zone.
Let's talk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where the IDF comes to, mans and controls the area where people, civilians come to get food. On June 11th, we saw 57 people killed. On June 17th, 59 people killed. On June the 29th, around 50
allegedly, according to Hamas numbers.
On June 29th, 31 Palestinians were killed.
Yes, all of those are allegedly, according to Hamas numbers.
To get food. So, Mr. Conricus, I mean, the fact is that whether or not you condemn our report or Haaretz's report, the point is that should the IDF not be taking responsibility for the actions of its soldiers?
No, I think you're very, very mistaken. And all of the numbers that you said, I think you should professionally say that this is allegedly and according to Hamas sources. And let's be clear who we're citing and referencing. I know that it's very tempting to use Hamas numbers as if they are true, but this is a terrorist organization that abducts civilians, murders people, and then lies about it in the media.
And
you're sitting there. And you're sitting there and saying as if those are true numbers. So I would caution.
These are Israeli investigative journalists who are saying it. It's a flagship Israeli newspaper that's talking about it. We've seen the IDF soldier in our report saying it. So you can sit there and condemn the soldier. You can condemn the Haaretz report, and you can say that these numbers of people who are dead may not be true. But do you not believe that the IDF should take responsibility for all of this?
I'll tell you what I believe. I'll tell you that I believe that the Israeli forces are fighting in a densely populated urban area where the enemy, Hamas, is using civilians as human shields, masquerades as civilians on the battlefield, and you are terribly mistaken. Hold on, you made quite a long monologue, and I would be really grateful if I could kind of get in a half an answer here. And I will address it.
You're deflecting on what Hamas is doing.
No, I'm trying to answer your allegations, which are masquerading as a question, and I'm trying to answer the question by being factual. what I think is clear to anybody who is looking at the situation from an objective point of view, Hamas uses civilians, hides among civilians, and doesn't distinguish between itself and the civilian population. We've seen this before the war and throughout the war. That needs to be the foundation of understanding.
To get food.
But that needs to be the foundation of the understanding before we get into what's happening on the ground. And anything is a battlefield in Gaza.
When I read you these numbers, do you accept that civilians, dozens and dozens of civilians have been killed trying to get aid?
I know that there have been instances, yes, where there's been shots fired and there have been violence at the distribution sites. I fear that, the organization that stands to gain from it, it's not the IDF and it's not Israel. The organization that is trying to dismantle the independent provision of aid to Gazans is Hamas. And they are the ones who have been instigating events on the ground. So I think that is very important context for viewers to be able to know. I always ask myself, who stands to gain from a certain situation? From the disruption of humanitarian aid.
We've got about a minute or so left, but can I ask you, do you believe that soldiers within the IDF who've committed these crimes, and we've seen the likes of Ehud Olmert say that war crimes have been committed, a former Prime Minister of Israel,
without
do you believe
substantiating them, yes,
that these soldiers should be prosecuted?
Most definitely, whenever an Israeli, and that, by the way, has already happened. We've had Israeli soldiers that have been reprimanded. We have them relieved from duty, even officers. Whenever there has been wrongdoing, and that unfortunately is part of war everywhere, British troops, American troops, whenever you fight, sometimes people make mistakes and sometimes there's wrong judgment, and then there's investigations, and then people face consequences, and that has already happened.
Should the IDF be accountable? And was there a breakdown in the chain of command here?
No, far from it. As much as you would want that to be the picture, I hate to disappoint you, that is not the situation. And one or two reports or anonymous stories do not paint a full picture. The picture is Hamas using civilians as their human shields, Hamas abusing the civilian population, and Israel being forced to fight in an environment where it's almost impossible to distinguish between who is a combatant and who isn't. Israel tries to do that. I think Israel goes to tremendous lengths in order to minimize that. And again, when was the last time that you reported of a Hamas combatant firing weapons in uniform? When did you last see a Hamas video?
I'm not sure the point you're making. What we're seeing here is IDF soldiers coming out in reports by Israeli reporters, by our journalists on the ground in Israel, saying that these crimes are being committed. We're showing you the numbers of civilians being killed, trying to simply get aid and food, whether they arrive early, whether they arrive late, whether they arrive on time.
Provided.
We see the death toll continue to rise.
I think you're cherry-picking information.
On the ground in Gaza.
I think you're very much cherry-picking information because you failed to mention that more than 50 million meals have been provided over the last 4 weeks.
Well,
and those are the same Palestinians who you claim are crowding to get food. I think that's important information for your viewers to be aware of, and the fact that you're not reporting it is not really good, not part of the story.
We've been reporting about the blockade, the aid blockade that lasted
but have you reported
about
40 million meals that have been provided?
And we've been reporting about the number of people killed trying to get aid when the UN and various other charities and aid organizations haven't been able to get their trucks in, haven't been able to get their supplies in. And you've put in place this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is, shrouded in controversy in the way that they've handled the aid.
Which is providing food to the people who need it, directly to those who need it, not to Hamas, not to corrupt UN organizations, but it is providing it directly to the people who need it. And of course you are upset, and of course UNRWA is upset, and of course many people are upset because this is undermining the control of Hamas over the Gaza Strip. And I understand that there are vested interest, UN and global interest, in keeping the status quo as it is. And what Israel is doing is providing food, and and is providing humanitarian aid directly to the people who need it. And I think people at home in the UK should understand that more than 40 million meals have been provided in 4 weeks. That's not nothing. That's a lot of food and a lot of honest aid that has been provided.
I think that the statistics and the aid agencies around the world speak for themselves when they talk about the issues that the people of Gaza face. Mr. Conricus, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
The Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has made his first public appearance since the country's 12-day war with Israel and the US. He attended prayers in Tehran ahead of Ashura, which is one of Iran's most important religious ceremonies. It's taken on added significance this year in the wake of the conflict. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is in the Iranian capital, Tehran, and he sends us this report from there.
They rose to their feet shouting Haydar, a Shiite victory chant, ecstatic as their supreme leader emerged. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's first public appearance since the 12-day war began. His absence had raised fears about his health. His emergence, despite Israeli death threats, suggests a sense of defiance, which we witnessed among his people too. With ritual flagellation and mournful chants, they march as they have for almost 14 centuries. But this year, the Shiite festival of Ashura has special significance in Iran.
They are remembering the death of a religious leader 1,400 years ago, but his story, one of betrayal and deception at the hands of his enemies, could not be more relevant, they believe, to Iran today.
This ancient ceremony recalls the martyrdom of Imam Hussein in the 7th century, remembered by the devout as if it happened yesterday. The age-old virtue they celebrate, resistance against oppression, resonates powerfully today in the wake of Israel and America's attacks on their country. Worshippers were galvanized into defiance against their enemies. The lesson to be learned from Hussein is not to give in to oppression, even if it's the most powerful force in the world.
What do you think of Donald Trump?
About Trump?
What do you think?
I don't think about Trump. Nobody likes him. He always wants to attack too many countries.
Can Iran make peace with him, though, do you think? Is it possible for peace between Iran?
So, I love peace.
Do not worry about Donald Trump.
No, we don't worry about it.
Why not?
What?
Why not?
Because we don't want to screw up him. We can do any work that they want. We stay here. This country is for us. Nobody can force us to live here.
Billboards nearby draw a line between Imam Hussein's story and current events. And remember the dead, numbering almost 1,000, says Iran, many of them women and children. The official message here is also one of defiance, a government spokeswoman warning Israel to not even think about attacking again.
It is natural that we are very strong in defence, and as state officials have announced, this time Israel will receive an even stronger response compared to previous times. We hope that Israel will not make such a mistake.
But is there more for Israel to worry about if Israel attacks Iran again?
Our military forces are totally prepared, and our state forces are ready to provide required support. The people are totally united.
I assume it's right. Can anyone confirm this?
Death to Israel chants have replaced the sounds of Israeli warplanes in the skies over Tehran. Israeli hopes their attacks would push Iranians into toppling their government have proven unfounded. For many Iranians, it seems quite the opposite. The 12-day war has brought them closer together. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Tehran.
Next, 9 in 10.
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu looks like he'll leave the United States without announcing a Gaza ceasefire deal. A senior Israeli official says that any deal with Hamas is more likely to come within weeks rather than days. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has more detail.
Well, a really interesting briefing here in Washington from a senior Israeli official speaking on condition of anonymity. That's frustrating. It means we can't name them, but it gives them the ability to talk more freely. But yes, they were senior. That much is true. The context, of course, is that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on his final day of his 4-day trip here to Washington, due to head back to Israel tonight. The expectation from Trump and from him was that they would be able to announce some sort of a ceasefire during this trip. It hasn't happened. Negotiators continue to try and bridge the differences in Doha, but no breakthrough at the moment. And this official is certainly quite negative, less optimistic than stuff we've heard from Trump. The official said it might be possible to get a ceasefire within a week, 2 weeks, not a day. And on the prospect of that ceasefire lasting beyond 60 days, we will begin negotiations on a permanent settlement, but we achieve it, it's questionable. But Hamas will not be there. So a really clear sense there from the official in a briefing that lasted 2 hours, that whatever happens, Hamas will not be allowed to survive as a political or as a military entity. And on that, it's hard to reconcile that with the negotiations. I mean, Hamas is not in the business of negotiating its removal as an entity. So how do you reconcile that? Really, really very hard to see. The official said, we will offer them a permanent ceasefire. If they agree, fine, it's over. They lay down their arms and we proceed with the ceasefire. If they don't, we'll proceed with the war. The official said, we would want the IDF to be in every square meter of Gaza and then hand it to someone else. The suggestion there, we want to sweep the whole thing, clear them of Hamas, and then we will give the land to someone else to govern. And on that, the official said that they were not in the business of governing. We have no territorial designs for Gaza, but we do not want Hamas there. You have to finish the job, victory over Hamas. On the broader question of a two-state solution, the official said they're not going to have a state in the foreseeable future as long as they cling to the idea of destroying our state. And on the removal of Palestinians from Gaza, such a controversial issue, such a painful issue for Palestinians, the official said it is not forced eviction. It is not a permanent eviction. Critics of Gaza say it is forced because they are being effectively forced out because the land that they're living in has been completely destroyed. But the broad point is that this was a much more pessimistic assessment of the way the negotiations are going. And my sense is that unless there's some massive breakthrough, Netanyahu will go home without a ceasefire.
Which he did.
That's my...
Good evening. I want to start tonight's programme with a question. What will it take for the war in Gaza to end? Donald Trump says he wants a ceasefire, but while he calls for peace, his administration is cracking down on those who protest the loudest. He'd hoped to make a big announcement in Washington this week, but that's unlikely to happen. And as Benjamin Netanyahu prepares to return to Israel, his forces are continuing to kill hundreds of people in Gaza. This is all we can show you of the aftermath of an attack on a medical center. It was serving severely malnourished children and their mothers. They came for supplements that they desperately needed. Up to 10 children never returned home. And the cost for those who spearhead protests against atrocities like this is incredibly high. Take these two. One of them, an independent human rights advisor to the United Nations. The other, a student protester at Columbia University in New York. Francesca Albanese accused global companies of profiteering from Israel's war. She's now subject to US sanctions. Mahmoud Khalil led student demands for his university to stop investing in companies that supported the Israeli military. He was detained for 100 days and threatened with deportation, even though he had the right to live in the United States. Well, you'll hear our conversation in a moment, but we begin tonight with those harrowing scenes in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. Alex Rossi reports.
This is the aftermath of what Israel calls a targeted strike on a Hamas operative. The images are too graphic to show, but most of those killed are women and children. Mothers cradle their babies. It is absolute carnage. Families had gathered outside a clinic distributing baby formula in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza and were waiting for food when it happened.
Suddenly, at like 7:15 a.m., a strike hit in the front door of our primary health clinic, just 2 meters in front of the clinic. So, basically, we had 16 civilians died. 10 of them are children, 3 of them are women.
Israel's attacks on Gaza are intensifying all the time as the ceasefire negotiations grind on. People here are packing their belongings, displaced again after Israeli tanks moved in on the Al-Mawasi area, the so-called humanitarian safe zone. Israel claims it does not target civilians and abides by international law. But as fathers rush their lifeless children to hospital, they are denials that are simply not believed here. This is the aftermath of another mass casualty event. The Nasser hospital is overwhelmed, and this is now the daily reality. A woman weeps over the body of her child. She doesn't know where to turn or what to do. Not far away, another family is in total shock. This woman's sister was killed and her children were seriously injured after an Israeli strike in Khan Yunis. They don't know yet their mother is gone. She says, "I rushed to the hospital when I found out my sister was dead." As she speaks, the boy asks for his mum. She tells him not to worry. Mama is fine. But despite mounting casualties, Israel's war machine is not slowing. These IDF pictures show troops moving through the fractured landscape of southern Gaza. The Israeli military claims its operations are to destroy Hamas and its infrastructure. It claims these images show the demolition of tunnels. It is unclear when there will be a ceasefire in Gaza. And until there is, Gaza faces more death, more displacement, and more despair.
Punishment,
Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, the IDF says the incident is under review and that it regrets any harm to civilians. UNICEF's senior emergency coordinator for Gaza, Hamish Young, visited the site of that Israeli strike today. I spoke to him earlier and asked him to describe what he saw.
I went to the site and I spoke to a number of people who saw what happened. There were two men walking up the road, carrying backpacks. Obviously, they were the targets. I have no comment at all on the legitimacy of those two men as targets. But right when they were walking past the Project of Hope Malnutrition Treatment Centre, where there were a large group of people crowded outside, it was about 7:10 in the morning, waiting to get the supplementation. I'm sure you've heard there's a lot of malnutrition at the moment. There was a missile hit the two men from a drone, and they were just a couple of meters at most away from the large group. So the latest report we had is that there are 15 dead. I also know, tragically, one of those women was a grandmother. Because I met a young girl, 3.5 years old. Her name was Mahara. And she was being treated for severe shrapnel wounds at the nearby hospital, which we also visited. And she lost her mum and she lost her grandmother in that strike. This is just a tragedy beyond comprehension.
Yeah, as you said, you went to the site. You also went to the hospital where they were being treated. Just talk us through what you saw and witnessed at the hospital, the conditions of the hospital, because we know that supplies are scarce at these hospitals, and they really are, if not already at breaking point, in really bad condition, the hospitals itself. So when these strikes happen, it really does overwhelm them when these injured are taken there.
That's right, Yalda. It's Al-Aqsa Hospital. I mean, I've been there many times. It's one of the few hospitals in Gaza that's still functioning. Many of the wounded were there. They were also being moved out to other hospitals for certain scans because Al-Aqsa didn't have the necessary machines. So the young 3.5-year-old that I told you about, she'd been out in another hospital and come in. There was, it's just a scene of devastation. We spent most of our time there talking to a young mother. Domina was her name. She was suffering from multiple shrapnel wounds. She was lying in a bed with her relatives around her, a lot of other women. And I couldn't help noticing she was clutching a small baby shoe, like a baby's booty type thing, and just holding it and holding on to it. And we later learned that that was the booty of her son, Mohammed, who'd been killed just at the strike a couple of hours earlier. And I mean, and she told us that he just said "mama" for the first time that morning. I mean, we didn't keep it together, that's for sure. And we also met her other son, Emad, who fortunately did survive, but he had serious shrapnel wounds in the chest and his thigh, and he was at that stage in the ICU. So that's what we found at the hospital this morning.
You know, Hamish, yesterday I was speaking to your colleague, James Elder, who talked to us about the malnutrition, about the water shortages, about meningitis, about various other things. Just give us a picture. You're there now in Gaza, and this project, Project Hope, alongside, I understand, UNICEF, we're trying to give supplies and supplements to these children, to these mothers who desperately need it.
Yeah, well, that's right, Yalda. I mean, I've been here since the beginning, since November 2023, and this is the worst I've seen it throughout that time. Since the blockade on the 2nd of March, we've run out of practically everything. And of course, there's not enough food. There's not enough clean water. And as I said, the hospital situation is disastrous. So, of course, there's huge amounts of malnutrition, and it's increasing daily. The other thing that is really, really serious at the moment is the fuel shortage, because all of Gaza is running on generators, and at the moment the fuel is down to almost nothing. So there are generators supporting hospitals that are about to run out of fuel, and that means people on ventilators will die. As soon as that generator stops running, they'll die. There are many babies who are in humidity cribs and incubators because, of course, the mums are malnourished, so the babies are born premature and they need to go into these cribs. When the power stops, those humidity cribs, those incubators stop working. And they're not just what we're used to seeing of one baby in one incubator. Sometimes there's 3 and 4 of tiny little things in there. The other thing that's acute is the shortage of water, because there's not enough fuel to run all the desalination plants and the water wells, and there's not enough fuel to transport the water in the trucks. There's an acute shortage of water as well. All these things come together in the catastrophe that we're facing now.
Hamish, we're really grateful that you've joined us. I know this is a tough time for all of you working on the ground, so we're very, very grateful that you've joined us here on the programme.
Thanks you, Yalda. And if I can just say, the only hope now is a ceasefire. There's desperately needed ceasefire.
That was UNICEF Senior Emergency Coordinator for Gaza, Hamish Young there. Now, you heard a little bit about Mahmoud Khalil at the beginning of the show. His parents are Palestinian. He grew up in a refugee camp in Syria. And as a graduate student at Columbia University in New York, he led student protests against the war in Gaza. Then this happened.
You're going to have to come with us. Yeah, don't worry. No one's getting worked up. They're cuffing him.
You guys really don't need to be doing all of that. حبيبي كيف بدي أتصل فيك؟ Okay. Hi, Amy.
That moment was filmed by his heavily pregnant wife, Noor, who gave birth while he was in a detention center. The Trump administration accused him of un-American activity and of supporting Hamas. Today, his legal team filed a $20 million claim for false imprisonment and malicious prosecution. I spoke to him in the past hour. He told me what it felt like to be taken away in handcuffs.
It felt like kidnapping for the most part of it, when you have plainclothes agents and unmarked cars taking you from one place to another, expecting you just to follow orders and shackled all the time. So that was really, really scary, especially for that to happen in the United States without presenting any warrant arrest, or arrest warrant, or without presenting any crimes that I've committed. So it absolutely felt like kidnapping for the whole time. And for the next 30 hours, I was taken from one place to another, from New York to New Jersey to Texas, then to Louisiana, to a place where the Trump administration felt comfortable that they would get the outcome that they wished for.
You say that for 30 hours you were taken from one location to another. Did you know where you were going?
At all. They wouldn't tell me where we're going. They wouldn't answer any of my questions. And even they wouldn't, I've asked about my wife, because the last thing I heard from them was that they're going to arrest my wife if she doesn't stop filming them. So that was really, really scary to me, and to keep me in the dark for over 30 minutes and just expect me to follow orders from one car to another, being shackled, absolutely was frightening.
When you finally arrived at the detention facility, just talk us through what that experience was like, because the US government maintains that these places are safe and humane.
These places are as far from humane as it could be. A place where you have no rights whatsoever. You don't know if you have rights in these places, where you share a dorm with over 70 men with no privacy, with lights on all the time, with really terrible food, and basically being dehumanized at every opportunity. So definitely it's far from that, and it's a black hole.
At what point were you then given access to your lawyer and to your family?
It was the first day that I arrived in Louisiana, so approximately after 36 hours, I was allowed to speak to my wife, but still they refused for me to talk to my lawyers until we got a court order obliging the government to allow me to have a legal call with my lawyers. And these were very scary hours. Like, I did not know what's happening on the outside. I did not know that my wife is safe and that what's happening. Like, I was surprised when I saw on the news that, well, like Rubio has said all these horrible stuff about me, or Trump spewing all these lies also about my case and about who I am.
So far, the government has not accused you of breaking any laws in the court documents, but the administration officials have repeatedly said that you were involved in anti-Semitic activities, that you were agitating and supporting Hamas. Just your response to that?
These absolutely absurd allegations, and they are weaponizing anti-Semitism, weaponizing the anti-terrorism in order to stifle speech. What I was engaged in is simply opposing a genocide, opposing war crimes, opposing Columbia's university complicity in the war on Gaza. This is what I was involved in, and that's why they chose
to send me to Louisiana. That's why they chose to weaponize the immigration system, a system that they fully control, like from A to Z, rather than actually presenting evidence and go to an actual court where they can actually look at the facts. So it's absolutely absurd, and it's scary that now they're weaponizing anti-Semitism in order to stifle speech and in order to police thought in this country. And I said it once and once again that I take anti-Semitism and safety concerns very, very seriously. And there's no place for hate and bigotry in the Palestine movement in the United States. But these are being deliberately misrepresented, distorted, just to stifle speech, because it's easier for them to cancel speech. It's easier for them to throw us in jail than actually reflect on what's actually happening, which is a genocide in Gaza, that the U.S. is fully complicit in it.
Have they shown you or told you specifically the kind of, or presented any evidence where, which constitutes you supporting Hamas or inciting anti-Semitism?
Nothing at all, literally nothing at all. And they are depending on tabloid articles from right-wing media that were basically not even fabricating evidence against me. Like there's literally nothing against me in the media. They're depending on articles about groups that I'm allegedly part of. But basically, all these are retaliation against my freedom of speech, because I spoke out and spoke up against the U.S. and Colombia complicity in the genocide in Palestine. And this should scare everyone in this country, that they are actually now using these fascist tactics in order to stifle speech.
There is an immigration act that says the Secretary of State can remove a person that they deem adverse to foreign policy. Just talk us through where your case stands now.
My case now is basically the court, the federal court, an actual court, did rule that my detention is likely unconstitutional, that the Rubio determination is unconstitutional, that a person shouldn't have this power to target individuals for their First Amendment, for their freedom of speech. So this is where it stands right now, and it's a beginning. Like, we are still at the very beginning of a long fight against this administration, and now we're seeking accountability from this administration for their targeting against me, for their baseless allegations, for their smear against me, and for their malicious prosecution against me.
Just talk us through how your lawyers are doing that, because I understand your lawyers have filed a claim for $20 million in damages against the Trump administration for alleging that you were falsely imprisoned, maliciously prosecuted, and smeared as an anti-Semite as the government sought to deport you over your prominent role in campus protests.
Yeah, we're filing a federal torts claim, which is basically presenting evidence and asking also for evidence from the government. Basically, we are showing that what the government did to me is as you've mentioned, is malicious prosecution, just for the sake of shutting me up and not to continue to speak for the rights of Palestinians. And it's just the first step of accountability that I will seek now against everyone who took part in this in this horrible campaign against me. And I mean, we have an alternative, which is an official apology from the administration to stop these fascist policies against freedom of expression, against Palestinians in this country.
And of course, you missed the birth of your child, your firstborn. As we said at the beginning of this interview, your wife was heavily pregnant when you were taken away. Just, talk about how that was for you, knowing that she was giving birth and you didn't know when you would be released.
Hilda, to be honest, I don't think there's any word that can describe the agony and the sadness that I went through during that specific moment. To be deprived from such a divine moment, from a moment that my wife and I had always dreamed about. We planned so much for that moment, and to be deprived from that just because a politician did not like my speech in a country that's supposedly protects freedom of expression that's founded upon democracy, and I really don't think I can describe that moment and how I felt during that, and I don't think there's anything that will make up for missing the birth of my son and for missing being with my wife, supporting her during such a moment, of course.
That was Mahmoud Khalil. Let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins me live now. And Mark, we've been tracking and covering Mahmoud Khalil's story because, of course, everyone saw those images that his wife captured of him being taken away, detained by those ICE agents. And for a while, it was unclear where he ended up. And now he's out again after over 100 days and really speaking up against this administration.
Yeah, that was a fascinating glimpse into a story that really captured not the nation but the world and divided opinions. Some saw it as the delivery of what Trump had promised, which was an immigration crackdown, which is both on illegal immigrants and those that are seen to be not doing the right thing or saying things that are not right. But I think what it really clearly demonstrates is the cruelty of the Trump administration's immigration policies, and much more important even than that, it's the lack of due process, whether it be him or so many others around the country, thousands and thousands of people who have been rounded up by ICE agents, kind of secret police effectively, in the United States of America, rounded up and then crucially not put through a court proceeding and just sent to a detention center far away. Many of them do not get contact with their family and friends, and then in many cases they are simply deported. So it's the issue of no due process that I think has startled so many. Fascinating interview, brave of him to speak out, but one voice of many, many more.